Find the derivative of y equals the square root of g of x, then evaluate y prime of negative 4, where g of negative 4 is 9 and g prime of negative 4 is 12. Y here is the composition of two functions, the square root of g of x. G of x is unknown. It's inside the square root. The first thing I'm going to do is rewrite that square root as the g of x is raised to the first power, but second root, so it'll be to the 1/2 power. And the 1/2 power is the outermost function here. The g of x is inside of that. So we certainly have the chain rule for the derivative. Y prime, or dy dx, will equal, we start with the outermost, therefore a power rule. Let's bring the power down 1/2, leave the inside alone, g of x, subtract 1 from the power, I will call that minus 2/2, and then since the inside isn't just an x but an entire expression g of x, we have to multiply by the derivative of the inside for the chain rule. We will call that g prime of x. And we have 1/2 g of x to the 1 minus 2 negative 1/2 g prime of x. The negative 1/2 power can be moved to the denominator and be called a positive 1/2 power. So y prime, or dy dx, will be, the numerator is going to be the 1, and the g prime of x will stay in the numerator. So that means 1 times g prime of x, which will just be g prime of x. And in the denominator, we have the 2 down there already, and then the g of x will move down there and be raised to the 1/2 power. The 1/2 power means first power, second root, or just square root. So we can write that as the square root of g of x. And there's our derivative y prime. G prime of x over 2 times the square root of g of x. The next thing to do is evaluate y prime of negative 4. So y prime of negative 4 means to plug a negative 4 in for each of the x's, and we will have g prime of negative 4 over 2 times the square root of g of negative 4. Now g prime of negative 4 and g of negative 4, both those are given here. So g prime of negative 4 is a 12, and that's over 2 times the square root. G of negative 4 is a 9. So we have 12 over 2 times the square root of 9, which is a 3. 2 times 3 will give us a 6. 12 over 6, which we can divide the 6 in and give us 2.